I'm so not good. I'm not good with essays, guys.
Yours is a heck of a lot better than mine.
No. They can use no. No.
Look at my online stuff, and then that's what you can judge.
No, yours was like the I don't care. That was
so
the
much
best.
character. It was so fun to read.
Like I could read that again. Guess it? Huh? Who did that?
I did it.
Well, ask him. I'll help. I need help too. I don't know if it took him.
I don't know why I get upset.
It's so easy. It's so like creative. It's so good. Well, I love it. It's really good. Is he like a talker? Does he talk a lot?
Nope.
Well,
But he likes to make up stories. So,
sounds
Okay.
like he's pretty decent.
So we are in chapter 4. We left off here. Just make sure. That everything is being shared. Just need to go back to that slide. I'm in the wrong chapter. What am I doing tonight? Okay. There we go. That looks better. So APR, annual percentage rate. So think of that as the interest rate that we've been using in all of our calculations. APY, annual percentage yield, the actual percentage by which the balance increases in 1 year. So pretty much whatever the increase is in terms of dollars over what you started with is how you would figure out the yield. APY is typically higher than APR. And it's just because it's looking at a percent increase. Didn't know I could do that. I can zoom in, but I can't hit the next slide button.
and you go home.
It's just a sign, huh? All right, I guess I'll do it this way then. So just an example. You have $2,000 to invest in a savings account. And you have the choice of Bank A and Bank B. That's asking for the APY for each bank. So you'll have to use that formula there in order to figure out the new balance. So Bank A, that equals 2,000 times 1 plus 0.08 over, for compounding quarterly, n would be 4. To the 4 times y power, depending on how many years you want to use that for. So then b, same type of thing, 2,000 1 plus 0.084 over 12 this time. Raised to the 12 times y power. And say we look at this over 1 year, since we're looking for an annual percentage yield. So that means that exponent up there would be just to the 4th, and this exponent would be the 12th. So using the calculator, first one I got, let's see if you agree, 2,164.86. Okay, then same thing for the next one. Looks like 2,174.62. So then the APY for the first one, absolute increase would just be the amount that you earned from this. So in this case, 164.86 over your starting principal of, is everyone good if I just say 2K for 2,000? And then for this one down here, 174.62 over 2K. For that APY, so it looks like the first one would be 8.24%. And then the second one would be 8.73%.
Doesn't say anything about tiny difference, 100, so why? Because I got point of.
Yep, so as a decimal, that 0.0824 for the first one would be the same as
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. But either form would work there. Yeah. Any questions on how we got there? There we go. There are some Excel functions that you can use. To find APY, it's just going to be the equals effect choice, given that you already know what the annual percentage rate is and how many times it compounds per year for n. If you needed to find APR, but if you know what APY is, you can use nominal. So just using those commands in Excel if you didn't want to calculate that all by hand there. But now we'll start talking about some different ways of managing your money. One of the things in this chapter that I try to do is highlight some of the key things that you can do with money. Just because once you start working after you get your degree, that's probably going to be one of the first questions you have when you start getting the paychecks that come with the job, right? So CD, certificate of deposit, is a common one. You can actually get these at pretty much any bank that's out there. Basically, you give the bank money, they give you interest as long as you don't touch the money for the period of time that the bank tells you. Pretty safe form of investment, pretty much guaranteed to make interest money. Most of them start about 6 or 8 months, but you can lock in rates as much as I've seen 3 years at some banks. Typically, the highest interest rates are for the shortest time periods. If you want a longer time period, the interest rate will probably be smaller there. Like, for example, 5.1% interest for a 6-month one. But if you locked it in for 33 months, it goes to 3.05%. But savings plans are always a good way to go. Chances are you'll probably have to think about IRAs. So retirement options. Or if any of you have children, 529 college savings plans are typically a big deal too. Some forms of these give annuities, which are continuous payments after you meet certain criteria. But savings plans are based on making regular deposits. So it'll work pretty much the same way as the compound interest things. A would be considered the future value for the accumulated balance. But there are some pretty complicated formulas here to figure out the future value. I'll be honest, I think those look pretty obnoxious formula-wise. Would highly recommend using Excel to figure this out. Basically, this would be figuring out, say, you buy a house of some kind, and figuring out what is your monthly payment going to be in order to not only pay off the loan that you have, but also pay back all the interest that's going to accumulate over the length of time. So some Excel functions here. Future value when making a regular payment can be calculated using that function there. Just using it right in Excel. I believe the in-class assignment on Wednesday is going to be using this function and some of these other ones here. So just make sure that you have your laptops with you.
I'll just bring my desktop, I guess.
Oh, that's okay. We can pair you up with somebody.
I'll figure it out on my iPad or something.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather not drag in my 50-pound gaming PC to try to do Excel functions.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't blame you there. We can make that work.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I'm pretty sure you're going to be paired up with somebody too
Okay.
for this one too.
Okay.
Yeah. But pretty much when we get there, it's going to be a Excel sheet like this where you'll be able to fill in the information. And then we'll be able to get the numbers that we'll need. So some other ones, determining the regular payment needed to get to a future value. Is that function, the payment function. This would be something like, how much would I need to put in my savings account each month that gets this interest rate so that I eventually get so much money in there? Like say, for example, I put $500 a month in a savings account. How long would it take me to reach $10,000 if I get 3% interest a year? Is what this thing would tell you. But again, spreadsheet of some kind, you put the information in, you'll be able to get the number that you'll need. But we'll take some time on Wednesday to look at that there. But everything you can do with money will fall under three types of investments mainly. Ones that involve cash of some kind. Others that involve bonds or debt of some kind. Or stocks or equity. So in other words, giving money to a company of some kind. company does what the company does. When you decide that you want your money back, then the company gives you your portion of the company back based on how well it did in the stock market. But always ask yourself 3 considerations. Liquidity, basically how tough is it to withdraw or take out your money? What's the risk that you're putting into this? And how much return do you expect to make on the investment? Ideally, you would want all 3 of those before making a sound investment. But generally, you probably will only know 2 of them at any given time, with hopes that the 3rd one will work out. Keep in mind the general trend of the stock market over time is that, yes, you have ups and downs, but generally over time it goes up. So just know that if you put money into the stock market in standard things without getting crazy for a long period of time, chances are you're going to win on the investment. And it would be like putting it into the Dow Jones Industrial Average, or the Dow, which is the average prices of stocks of the 30 biggest companies that are out there. So think things like Apple, Tesla, I think Pepsi's in there. But 30 of the big companies make that up. You might have seen on social media that people were going crazy because the Dow just crossed 50,000 for the first time. I think it was last week. That's what they're referring to there. Two ways to make money on stocks: capital gains, which is basically selling a stock for more than what you paid for it, or dividends. Basically, if you are a loyal supporter of a company, every once in a while they'll throw a little reward to you for being a loyal supporter. Like, prime example, say I go on the stock market right now and I want to buy, name a company.
Lockheed Martin.
What's that?
Lockheed Martin.
Okay. And say I go on there and I buy a share for, let's say, $50. I hold on to it for a year. It goes crazy. It goes to $200. So how much would I make in the year if I sold it a year from now? If it went from 50 to 200.
$150.
$150. So that $150, I would have to pay capital gains on it when I decide it's time to sell. Fun fact for you, because we can't avoid taxes, right? Capital gains is typically taxed at 28%. So on that $150, I would have to give, what would that be, $42, I believe, straight to Uncle Sam, just for having the privilege of having the opportunity of making that money. or dividends. Say over the course of the year, they decide, let's give you $5 just for supporting us as a thank you. So say they do that once, that would be considered capital gains that I would have to pay 28% on that free money that they gave me, is the idea. But essentially, dividends are free money to you for just holding on to the stock. Free money is always good, right? But there's a lot of things that go into buying and selling stocks. Each company has a symbol, like Microsoft is MSFT. Some of the symbols make sense, some of them don't. But there's all kinds of information there that you can look into to determine whether or not you should be investing in something or not. But as a disclaimer, I am not a CPA or an accountant of any kind, so I cannot give any financial advice on that. My fiance, however, is studying to be a CPA, actually. She actually just finished her master's and is going to be starting her tests pretty soon. So I'll leave that to the professionals of the world. With bonds, things to keep in mind: face value, coupon rate, and maturity date. Just terms for how much you invest is face value. The coupon rate is essentially the interest rate. The maturity date is when can you collect the money. Could be a year from now, could be a month, a week, but some time period is the maturity date. And they typically show up in terms of yields for percentages on how well they do. Mutual funds are basically just a giant collection of stocks and bonds. So say you just decide, I don't really want to put all of my eggs in one basket. I don't want to put all of my money into one company. This would be the way to go here. Because typically the funds for mutual funds could be made up of hundreds of companies. And it's a weighted average, essentially. Little fun fact for you, if you're looking at purchasing mutual funds, the stock symbols, if they end in an X, that's going to tell you it's a mutual fund. And again, they have their own rules here. But VFINX, so index fund, mutual fund. A lot of them are owned by Vanguard. Vanguard is essentially this giant company that represents pretty much everything in the financial world. You'll see once you start getting retirement account things, you'll see the word Vanguard on pretty much all of them. I was going to say, if any of you ever had to deal with that for a past job? You have?
Yeah, quite a chunk of change.
Okay, nice.
So they did a good job.
Yeah, did do a good job. Best piece of advice I can give you for any type of retirement, especially work sponsored ones, chances are the workplace will provide a match for them. Always take advantage of that if you can.
Start early.
Hmm.
I do know, Penn Highlands is 4% match on your retirement. So,
That's good to know.
I used to work for Penn Highlands, so.
Okay. And actually, if we have time, there's something I can show you here how much of a difference starting early is. But to put it into a perspective, say you do $500 a month into a retirement account, say it averages 7% a year. If you're in it for, I think it was 20 years, it puts you at about $250,000, which sounds nice. Sounds really nice. But if you're in it for 30 years instead of 20, it's 1.5 million. 40 years would be about probably 3 or 4 million at that rate. But time is definitely your friend with those. And the interest rate, that's the other key thing. If you get a couple of years with really high interest rates, then that can help offset time as well. But that's when the money works for you. There are things out there where the money will work against you, though. And they show up in terms of loans, credit cards, mortgages, any type of situation where you borrow money that isn't directly in your pocket. Again, principal, installment loan that's paid off with regular payments. Loan term, the time you have to pay everything back plus interest. Depending on the thing that you're borrowing money for. Car loans typically are 4 to 7 years, I'd say, from what I've seen. Houses are typically 15 or 30. I know President Trump has been trying to get people on board with the 50-year mortgages. But there's a whole lot of reasons I would not recommend you do that, but that's just me. But different loan terms for different situations. Again, a rather complicated formula for figuring out the regular payment that you would need to make there. But the nice thing is Excel can do all of that for us. And assuming that this class runs the way that it has before, I'm pretty sure you won't have to use these on any exam or anything. I know the compound interest does show up, but generally these other formulas are only found in the Excel work from what I've seen. I'm assuming that's how it's going to continue to be, but that's what I would say there. But again, the payment function can be used to get you there. with an Excel sheet of some kind. One type of loan, I'm willing to bet at least somebody in here has to deal with these. Student loans. As someone who is still paying off his loans from college, I can tell you that they are real. Generally, though, the government has things in place on how those work there. But one thing you should know about student loans, I hope nobody is ever in this situation, but have you ever heard of somebody filing for bankruptcy before? You have? Okay. With bankruptcy, there are ways that you can get debt forgiven or reduced, that sort of thing. Student loans are one of the only types of loans that doesn't fall under that. So even if you declare bankruptcy and start over, those stay with you, is the idea. But there's subsidized loans and then there's unsubsidized loans. Pretty much what that means is when the interest starts happening. Subsidized means that the interest won't start until after you've achieved your degree. Unsubsidized means you start gaining interest the instant that you take the loan. See if there's anything else you should know. Once you do graduate, they typically give you a grace period before you have to start paying them back, just to give you time to find work and different things like that. I know when I went through it, it was 6 months, I believe, that they gave you.
I think it still is.
Okay. Yeah. And I will say, with any kind of loan, the more that you can pay on top of the minimum payment, the better off you're going to be in terms of interest. Because anything above the minimum goes directly on your principal, so it's going to make your loan pay off much faster. So an example here, suppose we have student loans totaling $30,000 when you graduate from college. APR is 6.53% and the loan term is 10 years. What are your monthly payments? Well, to do that, we could use the Excel method. But this might be better if I just show you visually here. So I am going to go to Mr. Google. Let's just go to a loan calculator. Okay, the loan amount was for $30,000. What other information did we have? APR is 6.53% and the loan term is 10 years. Compounded, we'll say annually. Hit the calculate button. You will pay $338.24 a month, giving them $10,589.09 more in interest. giving them a total of $40,589.09 across the 10 years. And the last question there was how much of your payment will be for interest to reduce your principal for the first month. If you'd like to figure that out, there's something called an amortization table, which is essentially something that we're going to be doing on the in-class assignment on Wednesday. The thing with any loans, whoever is giving you the money, they're going to make their money first before they give you credit. So the first month, that $338 you're giving them, they're only going to give you credit for $179.68. They're going to keep $158.56 for themselves as interest. But if you look at this over time, what happens to the interest as you keep paying? Starts at 158, then 157, then 156. So interest over time each month goes down, which means the amount that gets applied to your loan principal goes up. But again, we could have done this using Excel, using the payment command with this information. But essentially, using technology, we can get that information. Any questions about that? Okay, credit cards is a big one. The dangerous thing with credit cards is that you can keep buying things as you're paying things off. There's typically a minimum monthly payment. I can't emphasize enough how much of importance it is to pay more than the minimum. You know what the average interest rate for a credit card is now? 12%. That would be for a pretty good one now. I actually just got one in the mail the other day. Any of you ever gotten those in the mail? Like companies trying to get you to sign up. If you read the fine print the next time you get one of those, most of them are about 25 or 30%. Yeah. So that means you borrow $100 from them. In a year, if you don't do anything, it's going to turn into $130. So credit card balance of $1,500. APR is 21%. So we could think of this as a loan. 1,500 balance, 21% interest rate, 1 year to pay it off. And again, we could use Excel here if you wanted to, but we'll just get the same answer that we'll get here. $1,500 loan for 1 year at 21%. So you will be paying them $138.39 a month for 12 months, giving them a total of $1,660.66, paying them an extra $160.66 in interest. So that should answer A, B, and C. And then for D, what would payments be if it was 18% instead? $136.57 a month. So you would save a couple dollars a month for literally the same conditions, but a smaller interest rate. Any questions on that example? Okay, mortgages. That's typically one of the biggest loans that people get. Has things associated with it, down payment. Basically, the amount you have to give somebody in order to get the loan. Usually a percentage of the selling price. Most places require, I believe, 3% down.
Standard's 20.
Standard's 20.
Standard's 20. 20 to 25.
Mhm. And I know there are some other types of loans out there, because I think the 20 or 25 might be including the closing costs too, right?
I don't know. I've never bought a house.
Okay, that's fair enough. But typically, the more of a down payment you can give, the better they can do interest-wise for you. Closing costs, just because you'll probably have to work with a realtor to buy the house. There's paperwork, there's attorneys involved. There are costs associated with it. You can actually purchase points to reduce your interest rate, just because people have figured out the system, because they want to try and pay as small as possible for those kinds of things. There's fixed rate and adjustable rate mortgages out there. Fixed rate is, you know what your interest rate is going to be for the entire 15 or 30 years or 50 years. The adjustable rate means that the bank can change it at any time, but it has to be based on what the market is doing. So if interest rates go down across the market, then they would have to lower yours. But if rates go up, then they would raise your rate too. But again, visually, at the start of paying off a house, I'd say about 3/4 of your payment is going to interest to start. At the point where the principal starts to overtake the interest, so that would be about 270, so probably about there somewhere. You're about 18 years in, assuming that you only make the minimum payments. But fun fact for you, if you were to pay an extra $100 a month on a mortgage, Any idea how much sooner it would be paid off on average?
30 years, 10 years. And that's not much.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty close. Usually it's about 7 or 8 years off. So a 30-year mortgage becomes 22 or 23 if you pay an extra $100 more than you have to. But again, a lot of things are involved with that. So if we look at this example, Great Bank offers a $100,000 30-year 5% fixed rate loan with closing costs of $500 plus 1 point. So 1 point in this situation would be 1% of the 100,000. So that would just be 1,000, right? So in other words, you're going to be giving them $1,500 in cash right up front. So you can pay $1,500 and pay 5% interest for 30 years. Or the other one is 4.75%, closing costs of $1,000 and 2 points. So that would be 2,000. So how much would you have to pay the big bank for closing costs and the points? $3,000. Yep, the 1,000 plus the 2,000 there. So big bank, you can pay $3,000 up front. Or I should say, at 4.75% interest or 1/4% less. So without doing the math here, what do you think the better choice would be? Who thinks Great Bank? Okay. Who thinks Big Bank? Who's not sure? Okay. I'll tell you the one I would go with. I would probably go with Big Bank if it were me. Even though it's only a 1/4% different with an interest rate, on $100,000, that's $250 a year. $250 a year across 30 years, be about 7,500 or so, which is about how much you would be saving compared to the 5% interest rate. We could actually work this out using the compound interest formula to know for sure. But that's what I would do there. Any questions on that? Okay, credit scores are basically a measure of how well you're doing borrowing money from banks. Now, if you want to borrow money, you're going to need a credit score. Typically, anything above 700, 750 is in pretty good shape. They range from, I've seen 300 to 900 for credit scores. 3 companies come up with them: Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. And they basically just say, yeah, you borrow money, and this is how good we think you are at paying it back. Is essentially what that says. All kinds of things go into it, and it's actually used in determining whether or not you qualify for different types of loans. But some things that go into it: if you've always paid your bills on time, do you have any unpaid debt, how many loans you have, how long you've had them, are you using all of the available credit that you have you recently applied for other things, or have you been sent to collection, foreclosure, bankruptcy, those sorts of things. Okay, I was pretty close. 300 to 850 for credit scores. Usually a higher score makes it easier to qualify. You typically get better interest rates too. I know when I was applying for my mortgage, I think the magic number they said was 720 to get the best interest rate. So anything in that region is good shape. So 661 to 780. This is for buying a car. 6.88% interest on a new car, 9.33 on a used. If you can get your score to 781, notice how much of a difference it is. Or say stuff happened in your life and you have a credit score that's seen better days. Now your interest rate is up to that. You know how I said banks typically kick you when you're down with the overdraft fees last time? Same kind of thing here. That's the unfortunate truth there. But the one thing, regardless of where your life is, that you will never avoid is taxes. One of the things we'll look into doing here is figuring out some tax information. Just because we are getting to that point in the year where you'll have to start thinking about them. Does anyone know when tax day is? April 15th. Yep. Basically, all the money that you made in the past year, any source of income you have, the government needs to know about it by April 15th. When I say government, I mean the IRS, typically. And if the IRS doesn't know about it, or has questions about it, or just thinks that you're fibbing, then other things will happen with that,
Jail,
potentially.
jail.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's always jail.
Mhm. Yep. As long as if you don't follow those steps to get back, that is. Yeah. But typically, gross income is a thing there, minus adjustments. There are certain things that you can deduct from what you make. There's a standard deduction. I want to say it's like 14,000 per person. So the first $14,000 you make shouldn't have a lot of taxes on it in general, at least at the federal level. That's when they figure out your taxable income. Then they figure out how much you'll have to pay in taxes. They have some rather interesting tax tables. And then depending on how much you put in throughout the year versus how much they want, you basically either get the difference back if you paid more than you had to, or you have to pay them more. Between you and me, I just talked with my accountant the other week because of all the coin stuff this past year. And it is considered like self-employment, right?
So you're not like a small business owner or anything?
Nope, just like a individual, but I probably will get to that point. But let's just say it required me to send about $12,000 or $13,000 to the IRS. But that should balance it out for 2025, I'm hoping. But you make money, you'll have to pay tax on it. No way around it. And there's an example here. Susie earned wages of $48,600, received $750 in interest from a savings account, contributed $1,200 to a tax deferment retirement plan, and was entitled to deductions totaling $14,250. That sounds like the standard deduction. So gross income would be the $48,600 plus the $750 in interest.
Is it $49,350?
Yep, $49,350. Then from there, her adjusted gross income in this situation, she contributed $1,200 to a tax deferred retirement plan.
47,550.
47,550.
Yep.
By subtracting that from that, right? Okay. And then from there, the taxable income would be deducting the 14,250.
33,300.
33,300. Okay. And basically, whenever they start figuring out how much you owe the IRS, they're going to focus in on that number, the 33,300 number. After taking what you made minus anything that gets a tax deduction and your standard deductions. This might be a little off topic here, but the tax deferred retirement plan, chances are that is probably an IRA of some kind. There's actually two types of IRAs out there. Traditional IRA, and then there's something called a Roth IRA. Have you ever heard of a Roth IRA? Yeah? Okay. You know what the difference is between them?
One before tax and the other one's tax.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So with the IRA, the traditional one, you're basically taking the tax break now. But then when you go to take the money out in retirement, that's when you'll pay taxes on it. For the Roth one, you're not taking the tax break now, so you're paying tax on what you put in to the Roth now. But then in retirement, when you go to take it out, it is all going to be tax-free. Typically, the younger that you are, the more likely you'll benefit from the Roth IRA, from what I've heard. But basically, it's just when do you want to pay tax on your retirement stuff? Filing status with taxes. Single is the default choice. If you're married, you have two choices for filing jointly together or filing separately. Say you're in like a divorce situation of some kind. Depending on where you're at in the process, married filing separately can occur, or head of household if, say, you've already moved out or your spouse has moved out. Head of household is essentially when you are at a house by yourself and you have a dependent, so like a child or like another family member. That's usually what head of household is. Each of them has their own pros and cons. But tax deductions are the things that can help lower how much you have to pay in taxes. Most people fall under the standard deduction. So basically, because you exist and are working and are earning, you can automatically claim the standard, which was the 14,250 number. However, if your life is kind of expensive in certain areas, or if you have a lot going on, and you have charitable donations or mortgage interest or other taxes that you can deduct that are more than the 14,250 number, you can itemize. Basically, they're saying if you have more deductions than the standard, you can do that. You just have to tell us what they are, essentially. But say you bought a house for $1 million and your mortgage interest is $40,000 a year, you will bypass the standard deduction pretty quickly with that. Any questions there? Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for tonight. What do you think? Okay. So then what I'll do then, I'm going to push the homeworks back to Wednesday then, just to make sure that you have enough time to look at them. We'll look at the in-class assignment on Wednesday, and then if we have extra time, we'll finish up the notes for chapter 4 then. Sound like a plan? Okay.